In 1932, as Germany teetered on the edge of collapse, a new symbol was unveiled: two red flags encircled, a direct challenge to the rising power of Adolf Hitler's Nazis. This was Antifascistische Action, founded by the German Communist Party and led by Ernst Thälmann. Their goal was simple: stop fascism before it could seize the nation. But just a year later, Hitler unleashed a crackdown so complete that Antifa's leaders vanished, their emblem erased from public life, and defiance was met with imprisonment or death. The memory of their struggle faded into propaganda and silence. How did a street movement become so dangerous that Hitler tried to wipe it from history? This is the untold origin of Antifa, and the reason its story still haunts the present. On May 26, 1932, the Communist Party of Germany published a bold proclamation in Die Rote Fahne. Antifascistische Action had been formed. The timing was no accident. Across Berlin, workers' districts simmered with tension. Unemployment soared above 6 million, and street battles between Nazis and leftists left wounds that never fully healed. In the weeks that followed, flyers appeared on factory gates and tenement walls calling for a mass rally to launch this new front against fascism. On July 10th, thousands gathered in central Berlin for the inaugural demonstration. The crowd was a sea of banners and red flags stretching from Alexanderplatz to the edge of the city's government quarter. Organizers stood atop trucks, their voices echoing through loudspeakers as they called for unity and resistance. Police cordons ringed the square, wary of violence, while supporters pressed in from the side streets. The atmosphere was charged, equal parts defiance and fear. For many, this was more than a political rally. It was a public stand against the growing threat of Nazi terror. The new emblem, two bold red flags encircled, hung from every lamppost and armband. Designed by Max Gebhard and Max Keilson, the symbol promised solidarity in action. Contemporary newspapers described a mass event, with some reports estimating several thousand in attendance. The KPD press hailed it as a historic show of working-class strength, while opposition papers warned of chaos and disorder. Heavy police presence underscored the risk. Just weeks earlier, a brawl in the Prussian parliament had left 8 injured, and Berlin's streets were already scarred by violence. Beneath the banners, the crowd was a mix of factory workers, unemployed men, women with children, and veterans of earlier leftist campaigns. There were no membership cards. Participation was the only requirement. Red mass self-defense units, many drawn from the now-banned Rotfront Kämpferbund, mingled with unity committees from local apartment blocks. Chants of solidarity rose and fell, punctuated by nervous glances toward the police lines. Some in the crowd eyed each other warily, aware of deep divisions on the left, but for that afternoon, the sense of common purpose was palpable. As the rally ended, leaflets littered the square and the two-flag symbol lingered in the air. The crowd dispersed into the city's labyrinth of courtyards and alleys, carrying with them a promise that fascism would not go unopposed. In the weeks ahead, Berlin would see a surge in political violence, but on that July day, thousands had dared to gather, defiant, visible, and united beneath a new banner. The two-flag emblem, bold and unmistakable, became the visual signature of Antifascistische Action from its first public appearance. Designed in 1932 by Max Gebhard and Max Keilson, both members of the Association of Revolutionary Visual Artists, the logo drew on the language of street agitation and political urgency. Two red banners, side by side within a circle, offered a promise of unity, at least in theory, between Germany's divided left. For the KPD, the image was more than decoration. It was a statement of intent, printed on banners, armbands, and leaflets, meant to rally workers in factories and tenements alike. The red flags, familiar from decades of socialist struggle, now stood together as a call for militant defense against fascism. The circle suggested solidarity and readiness, a closed rank against encirclement by Nazi and reactionary forces. The emblem's message was amplified by the party press. Die Rote Fahne described Antifascistische Action as the Red United Front under the leadership of the only anti-fascist party, the KPD. Posters and broadsheets paired the twin flags with slogans demanding working-class unity. even as the reality on the ground remained fractured. The design's simplicity gave it power. Unlike the Iron Front's 3 arrows or the Nazi swastika, the two-flag motif was direct, confrontational, and easily reproduced. It spread quickly through the KPD's network, appearing on factory walls and neighborhood windows and at every major rally that summer. Behind the symbol stood Ernst Thälmann, the KPD's leader since 1925. Thälmann, a former Hamburg dock worker, had risen through the party's ranks with a reputation for discipline and loyalty to Moscow. He embraced the new emblem as a tool for mobilization, insisting that the fight against fascism required not just rhetoric, but a visible collective identity. To Thälmann, the twin flags represented more than just party branding. They were a standard to rally the working class in a time of crisis. In speeches and editorials, he urged supporters to display the emblem as a badge of defiance, a sign of readiness to defend their neighborhoods and workplaces. The artists behind the logo, Gebhard and Kielsen, drew on their experience in agitprop and revolutionary design. Their work reflected the urgency of 1932, when street violence and political uncertainty demanded symbols that could be recognized at a glance. The red circle around the flags, stark and enclosing, hinted at both unity and siege. For many, the emblem offered a sense of belonging in a city fractured by political terror. It was not just a logo, but a warning and a promise that fascism would be met with organized resistance. Within weeks, the two-flag design was everywhere in Berlin's working-class districts. It appeared on posters pasted over Nazi placards, on armbands worn by self-defense units, and in the pages of Die Rote Fahne. The emblem's rapid adoption reflected both the KPD's organizational reach and the hunger for symbols of resistance. For Thälmann and his followers, the image captured the hope that, even in a city on the brink, the left could stand together, at least for a moment, against the rising tide. Antifascistische action did not rely on formal membership lists or party cards. Participation was the only requirement. In Berlin's factories and dense working-class neighborhoods, local committees sprang up in apartment blocks, workshops, and allotment gardens. These cells drew heavily from the Red Mass Self-Defense Units, RMSS, whose roots stretched back through earlier formations like the Rotfront Kämpferbund, banned by the Social Democrats after the deadly May Day crackdown of 1929. The RMSS brought a tradition of street-level organization and paramilitary discipline. Meetings were often held in secret, with rotating locations and coded messages. Each committee operated with a degree of autonomy, able to respond rapidly to Nazi provocations or police raids. There were no official roles, but the network was dense. One could find a unity committee in nearly every block of Wedding or Neukölln. Despite the rhetoric of solidarity, the movement's structure exposed deep fractures on the left. The Communist Party's internal directives, published in Die Rote Fahne and circulated through back channels, insisted on strict adherence to the party line. The doctrine of social fascism, imported from Moscow, defined the Social Democratic Party not as a potential ally, but as a main enemy. In July 1932, KPD newspapers declared, "Anti-fascist action means untiring daily exposure of the shameless, treacherous role of the SPD and ADGB leaders who are the direct, filthy helpers of fascism." This language was more than polemic. It shaped how local cells operated. SPD members could only join if they publicly renounced their party, and joint action was rare and fraught. The contradiction played out in daily practice. In some districts, RMSS units shared intelligence with Social Democratic tenants committees, especially when facing Nazi attacks or eviction threats. Yet official collaboration was forbidden. The KPD's Central Command discouraged any appearance of unity with the SPD, even as both faced the same street violence. The Iron Front, the SPD's own anti-fascist formation, organized parallel defense efforts, often in direct competition with anti-fascistische action. In the press and in flyers, each side accused the other of betrayal, even as Nazi columns marched through their neighborhoods. This rigid doctrine sometimes led to bizarre alliances. In November 1932, just weeks before Hitler's appointment as chancellor, KPD activists in Berlin joined forces with the Nazi trade union NSBO to organize a wildcat transport strike. It was a moment of tactical confusion. The communists saw Nazi workers as potential recruits, while still denouncing Social Democrats as the greater threat. Such episodes bewildered rank-and-file members, who faced the daily reality of SA violence and police repression. The structure of Antifascist action was both its strength and its weakness. The absence of membership cards allowed for flexibility and rapid mobilization, but it also meant a lack of central coordination, especially as the political situation deteriorated. While local committees could act quickly to defend tenants or organize strikes, they struggled to build lasting alliances. The promise of unity, emblazoned on banners and posters, was undercut by the party's own directives. As the summer of 1932 wore on, the gap between the movement's militant rhetoric and its fractured reality grew ever wider, setting the stage for the violent confrontations that would soon engulf Berlin's streets. On July 17, 1932, the streets of Altona, a working-class suburb on the edge of Hamburg, became a battleground. That Sunday afternoon, nearly 1,000 uniformed SA stormtroopers marched beneath swastika banners, their route chosen to cut directly through the heart of a communist neighborhood. Local residents, many aligned with Antifascist action or the remnants of the Red Front fighters, watched from windows and rooftops as the column advanced. The march was no accident of geography. It was a deliberate act of provocation staged in the middle of an election campaign already marred by violence. Police, deployed in force, flanked the SA column. Their brief was to protect the marchers, not to intervene unless violence broke out. But in Altona, tensions had been simmering for weeks. The arrival of the SA, shouting slogans and singing Nazi songs, drew crowds of local workers and their families. Stones and bottles flew from side streets. Some witnesses later claimed that shots rang out from upper floors, though the truth of rooftop snipers remains disputed. What is clear is that chaos erupted in minutes. Police opened fire into the crowd, their bullets striking indiscriminately. By nightfall, the cobblestones were stained with blood. Official reports listed 18 dead, 16 civilians, and 2 police officers. Dozens more were wounded, many by gunfire. Forensic investigations conducted decades later, including the work of Leon Sherman, cast doubt on the police version of events. Ballistic evidence suggested that most casualties were caused by police bullets, not by sniper fire or street-level fighting. Among the dead were dock workers, seamstresses, and teenagers, ordinary residents caught in the crossfire. The youngest victim was just 17 years old. Arrests followed swiftly, targeting known leftist organizers. Within days, KPD newspapers published the names of the dead, framing them as martyrs of the working class. Nazi press blamed communist terror, while government officials insisted the police had acted in self-defense. The aftermath was a wave of fear and anger. Funerals became political rallies, drawing thousands from across Hamburg. Posters appeared overnight, bearing the faces of the slain and calling for justice. In Altona, trust in the police collapsed. Many residents believed the authorities had chosen sides, protecting the SA while treating local workers as enemies. For Antifascistische Aktion, Bloody Sunday became both a rallying cry and a warning. The violence in Altona was not an isolated event. It signaled the breakdown of public order and the growing willingness of state power to use lethal force against its own citizens. In the weeks that followed, the Nazi press and their political allies used the events of July 17th to demand a crackdown on leftist organizations. Emergency decrees gave police sweeping new powers. The narrative of Red Terror justified mass arrests and paved the way for the suppression of all opposition. For the people of Altona, the cost was counted not only in lives lost, but in a deepening sense of isolation. The barricades had fallen, but the memory of that day lingered, proof that the struggle against fascism would be fought not only in rallies and meetings, but in the desperate defense of entire neighborhoods. On the night of February 27, 1933, flames engulfed the Reichstag building. By dawn, Hitler's cabinet had the pretext it needed. Within hours, President Hindenburg signed the Reichstag Fire Decree, suspending freedom of speech, assembly, and privacy of communication. Police raided communist offices and private homes across Germany. By morning, thousands of left-wing activists, trade unionists, and suspected dissidents had been arrested without charge. The legal foundation of the Weimar Republic was swept aside in a single stroke. Weeks later, the new regime pressed for even broader powers. On March 23, 1933, deputies assembled under heavy police guard in the Kroll Opera House. The Enabling Act, formally titled the Law to Remedy the Distress of People in Reich, was put to a vote. Only the Social Democrats dared to oppose it. Otto Wels, their leader, rose to deliver the final speech of the Weimar Parliament. He warned, "Freedom and life can be taken from us, but not our honor." His words fell on deaf ears. Surrounded by armed SS men, the remaining deputies voted overwhelmingly to grant Hitler authority to legislate without parliamentary consent. The measure passed by 444 to 94. In the days that followed, all independent unions, opposition parties, and left-wing newspapers were banned. Antifascistische Action ceased to exist as a public force. Its members, already targeted by police, now faced indefinite detention or worse. The machinery of state terror had been legalized. Germany's brief experiment with democracy was over, destroyed not by a coup but by laws passed in its own parliament. Dachau opened its gates on March 22, 1933, just weeks after the Enabling Act passed. The first prisoners arrived that morning, transferred from Munich's Stadelheim prison and the Landsberg fortress. They were not Jews or so-called habitual criminals, but men arrested for their political convictions, communists, trade unionists, and those accused of anti-fascist activity. Early registers list hundreds of names, many linked to the Communist Party or the networks of Antifascistische Action. For these detainees, the charge was not a specific crime, but the suspicion of disloyalty to the new regime. Possession of a red flag or a banned newspaper could mean indefinite detention. Inside Dachau's barbed wire, the rules were simple and brutal. Guards, many recruited from the SS, enforced silence, forced labor, and constant humiliation. Beatings were routine. Prisoners were assigned numbers, their identities reduced to entries in a ledger. Some tried to send word to their families, but letters were censored or never delivered. The camp's early days set the pattern for what would follow across Germany: the erasure of opposition through terror and isolation. Outside the wire, Joseph Goebbels' propaganda ministry waged its own campaign. Newspapers and radio broadcasts branded all anti-fascists as traitors, blaming them for Germany's woes. The term itself, anti-fascist, became synonymous with conspiracy and treason. Possession of Antifascistische Action pamphlets or emblems was treated as evidence of subversion. Goebbels' directives instructed editors to denounce leftist resistance as criminal, fueling public suspicion and fear. In the new Germany, even a slogan or a symbol could mean a cell in Dachau. On May 26, 1932, Antifascistische Action was founded and announced in Die Rote Fahne. Its twin flag emblem was designed that same summer. Within 1 year, Hitler's Reichstag fire decree and the Enabling Act outlawed all left-wing opposition. Documents show thousands of activists, including many from Antifa, were detained at camps like Dachau. The regime's propaganda branded anti-fascism as treason, erasing its symbols and silencing its leaders. Yet not all records survived. Membership lists were never kept, and the fate of many organizers remains unknown. Historians agree that Antifascistische Action's legacy was shaped as much by its early divisions as by Nazi violence. Today, the emblem resurfaces worldwide, its origins rooted in the street battles and repression of 1932 to 33. The archival evidence is clear. Antifa's story began decades before the internet, forged in the struggle against dictatorship. The lesson endures. The fight against fascism has deep documented roots that regimes could not fully erase.